Friday night on the first Friday in August and the first weekend of the month of August. Hi everybody, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Welcome to my YouTube channel for the August 2nd, 2019 rendition of the Joe Chaffee Weather Show. Hope you've got some good weekend plans. As the headline graphic pretty much sums up the weekend across the U.S., it's a typical summer weekend. Some places are going to be dealing with some scattered showers and storms embedded in a basically very warm to borderline hot conditions if you're east of the Mississippi, warm to hot but dry through much of the west, although we do have some pockets of showers and storms there as well. But there's nothing that really stands out that much. A couple of places dealing with some flooding tonight, both regionally and locally. We'll take a look at those in a second. We're going to run through the tropics and start with Hawaii, where we have Tropical Storm Erik and Tropical Storm Flossie still on the satellites and on the weather map. So we're going to start with those. And as advertised, it all pretty much plays out. These Hawaiian storms do have, they unlike the storms in on the Atlantic basin, where there's so many complications, and of course you've got the impacts of all the different land masses. In the Pacific, you've got the Pacific Ocean, and then you've got Hawaii as the target zone. And as we've mentioned, how you would think Hawaii would get more activity with regards to tropical storms and hurricanes, but there's a bit of a natural protection because there's always a lot of wind shear going on. And in fact, when you look at Erik, it is really just sort of a shadow of its former self. It's a tropical storm with top winds of 45 miles an hour. It's about 300 or so miles southwest of Hilo and about 325 miles or so south of Honolulu. So the center itself is passing way to the south. And then you have Flossie that is out to the east of that, just moving right along to the west-northwest. And it seems as if you have Erik that's passing south of Hawaii by 300 miles or so, and you're going to have Flossie probably wind up passing north of Hawaii by about a couple of hundred miles or so. And Hawaii is going to just essentially experience minimal impacts, getting some minimal impacts from Erik at the moment. We also are seeing that Flossie is not particularly well organized. We are also having wind shear issues going on here. And as a result, you can see the brighter white clouds are actually to the east of the circulation center, where you don't have too much going on to the northwest, west, or southwest. Don't expect Flossie to strengthen from here. In fact, it's gaining latitude, and the ocean water temperatures are from 81 degrees or less. So you're likely to see additional weakening over the next several days as this continues to just kind of plod along. But we've got the radar from Hawaii. I've got the loop here, and it's in the north and northeast semicircle that you're seeing some showers and downpours. But notice they are kind of clustered. There's a band well to the south of the Big Island. You've got a northeast southwest band that is running through the middle parts of Hawaii, and that really is about it. There's probably some rough surf, certainly a lot of low clouds and some lighter showers that are around as well. They're dealing with some rains and some occasional heavy rains, but nothing that seems to be standing out as too problematic. I've only been to Hawaii once many years ago, and many years ago. It's a beautiful state. If you haven't been there, everybody should go there at least once. I'm not 100% familiar with the local climates, because there are some very definitely local climates, especially in the Big Island of Hawaii, where you have a shadow effect in terms of the rain when it comes in favoring one side versus the other, and because of the elevation. And of course, you are seeing here the results of a weakening tropical storm. So it's not the most impressive rain area that you could have. Now here's the forecast track for Erik, continuing on basically on a west or west-northwest course for the next couple of days, gradually weakening into a tropical depression, and by Sunday morning, the Hurricane Center has it as a remnant low. Meanwhile, as far as Flossie is concerned, going to remain a tropical storm, and by 8 a.m. Monday, it'll make its closest pass to the Big Island, passing, I would say, probably about 150 to 175 miles to the northeast of the Big Island. The center will be. And if you're dealing with a tropical storm, more than likely, most of the heavier convection will likely be to the north and northeast of the center, particularly because you're going to have wind shear going on. And then Flossie is going to be responding to a weakness in the Pacific Ridge that's going to turn it around and move it on toward the north. So for the most part, this is, as I said, it's not a huge deal with respect to Hawaii not getting any kind of major hit, nor were they really supposed to. Again, all of this kind of plays out according to plan. Now let's take a look at what's happening in the Atlantic, because we mentioned yesterday that there were a lot of things out there from what I was seeing that really kind of argued against any kind of major development. And in fact, it was right at the end of the live stream where we picked up the Hurricane Center's outlook, where they started downplaying the tropical wave that is east of the Windward Islands because of unfavorable conditions in the longer term. Still thinking that it might become a depression. They still mentioned that in their current outlook, but they went from a 70% chance to a 40% chance. And the reason is, well, first off, if you take a look at the wave itself, it still remains disorganized. You can see there's a little bit of turning going on, maybe some sort of broad low-level circulation in play here. But because of the upper air conditions not being really favorable, you've got some wind shear issues going on. You're not able to develop a concentrated area of showers and storms near what would be the circulation center. And while conditions may temporarily become, at the very least, let's call it less hostile, we continue to have issues. And if you think back to last night, this area that's from northeast of the Leeward Islands, northeastward out into the Atlantic for hundreds and hundreds of miles, that's an upper trough that hasn't moved. Okay, and that's really important, because if it doesn't get out of the way, that is going to eventually create some wind shear issues and prevent any kind of significant development out of this. So right now, I think you have to really argue against this lead wave developing much beyond a depression if it gets there. I don't think conditions are ripe for a tropical storm to come out of this, at least from what I'm seeing at this point. We also have, if you look on the lower right of your screen, toward the African coast, we talked about a wave that moved off yesterday, and you can see there's like this curl of clouds. There was a lot of convection that came off, but now that convection has waned somewhat. But that's another tropical wave that is moving westward. So there is a little bit of a signature to it, maybe a weak low-level circulation there, but there's no thunderstorm activity at all near the circulation center. So that'll be coming right behind it. So you've got these two tropical waves. Looks like there's a third wave getting ready to move off the African coast. You have this upper trough running from the leewards northeastward for hundreds of miles. You have this stuff that's off the Florida coast and off the southeast coast as part of the frontal boundary. It all got merged together from the system that was in the Eastern Caribbean back earlier this week, so that's not going to develop. So I'm thinking that we are not going to worry too much about it. This is a very good reason why you don't put too much faith in weather models, particularly in the longer term. And here, as far as some of the hurricane models, we showed you them yesterday just to kind of contrast the fact that those models were just way too aggressive, and I didn't even bother to look at the hurricane models today. But here's a profile of the atmosphere way up at about 30,000 feet or so. One of the things about hurricanes, that they're warm core systems. They're totally different from the standard low pressure and cyclones that move across the rest of the world. The winter cyclones and those lows. The warm core systems are stronger near the bottom of the atmosphere and much weaker at the top, whereas the other storms are in reverse. They're stronger at the top and relatively weaker at the bottom. You could have a powerful storm in the wintertime, but usually when you look at a powerful storm in the wintertime, if you look at what's going on aloft, it's really, really powerful. Well, in the instance of a hurricane, it likes to be in an environment where the upper level winds are light. And if there are layers as you go up through the atmosphere where those upper air winds are stronger, you're going to wind up having the tops of the thunderstorms that develop being blown off to the northeast, as we see on the examples with the Pacific systems. Well, here's the problem. This map shows those upper level winds way up at about 25, 30,000 feet. Notice that while in the blue and white, that's where the winds are light. So where your L is on the map, that is where your low center is from this system. And it's kind of on the edge of some strong wind shear to the north and stronger wind shear to the south. This moves along on Saturday, and there's a lot of shear there off the coast of South America where this low center is supposed to be, on the south side. There's an area of light wind shear just north of where the low center is, but you look at this upper air and you just have to wonder, how are you going to get anything to develop out of this? And by the way, notice that you've got really strong winds. If you look at the scale on the side here, you've got those, when you get into those oranges and reds, you're talking about 35, 40, 45, 50 knots of wind shear across the Caribbean, into the Northeast Caribbean, and then out all across much of the subtropical Atlantic. So conditions are just not good. You do have some light wind shear in the area from the southern leewards eastward. So if that low gets into that area of light wind shear, that's probably where you could see something happen. But again, as we go, even if that happens, look at the wind shear increasing over the Leeward Islands and into the Northeast Caribbean going into early next week. Now, while that's going on, further out in the Atlantic, suddenly you have a fairly large area of light upper air winds, light wind shear through the tropical Atlantic as we move into next week. So it'll be interesting to see if that galvanizes any of the other waves coming off the African coast. That condition's going to hold for a short time, because as we go through next week, you do see pockets of strong upper air winds dropping all the way down into about 15 degrees north. So even if you get one of these waves coming off the African coast now to try and develop into something, there are going to be issues going forward. So the shear areas are important. Gradually going into next weekend, much of the tropical Atlantic suddenly is in an area of light wind shear. So it's one of many factors that you look at, but it's probably one of the most important factors when it comes to seeing these systems in the development stage. Because if you've got those hostile upper air conditions in play, you're never going to see anything of consequence take shape. All right, back home we go, and looking at weather conditions tonight, there's a really strong thunderstorm complex it's south of Williamsport and well north of Harrisburg that's just been kind of sitting there for the last hour and change, and some pretty intense cells have developed in it. There's a bunch of flash flood watches up. It's one small little cluster, but this is the kind of day it is where we saw some odd pop-ups We had winds from the south-southeast across Long Island, and that kept temperatures in the 70s. Most of the temperatures are in the upper 70s and low 80s. We had a milky sky with clouds. There were some heavy rains this morning down in parts of Virginia and Maryland on the order of several inches in some places. That rain disappeared, and now you've got some pop-up cells that have developed in parts of the Delmarva Peninsula, and also back in Johnny Quest country in northwestern Virginia. You've got some downpours and thunderstorms, and actually in some places where these obs are temperature of 60, Davis, I believe that's Davis West, that's on the West Virginia side. That's got to have some elevation there, but they had a thunderstorm, a temperature of 67. So here's one probably in the heart of one of those thunderstorms at Elkins in West Virginia. They're 64, zero visibility and heavy rain. So I'm not sure of Elkins, the elevation there, but it's down to 64. So some of these thunderstorms are really doing a good job of cooling things off. And even back through Pennsylvania, you're seeing some temperatures down in the upper 60s. Meanwhile, up in New England, where we had some drier air, and into upstate New York, dew points down in the 50s and even some 40s with the dew points up in upstate New York. Saratoga must have been a great place to be today. Also up through New Hampshire and Vermont, you're seeing temperatures in the low 80s with dew points in the upper 40s to low 50s. Looking good in Maine. Temperatures there running generally in the low 80s with dew points down in the 50s. And of course, you go further south, you're seeing dew points upper 60s. A few places in eastern North Carolina with dew points in the low 70s with some heavier showers and storms. And then you've got some scattered storms as you go through South Carolina and Georgia. Florida was particularly busy with showers and storms yesterday, and they're kind of doing it again today, although it looks like the area today is a bit less robust than what we had yesterday. Here's the wide radar view. Does kind of look like early August with the activity, and of course the frontal boundary is feeding those downpours along the Carolina coast down into Florida. And this is what I'm talking about with respect to what's happening in Pennsylvania. You can see it here, that big blob of red. And I have it actually on the local radar, and I've got it looped. This is the State College, PA radar. So south of William, now actually getting very close to Williamsport. You're seeing some very heavy cells in there. A severe thunderstorm warning is the yellow box, the green box, a flash flood warning, and that complex has just kind of been inching to the northeast. That east-west, those east-west bands are always a problem, because if you're underneath that band and something is moving from west to east, you've got problems. Okay, you've got big issues. Some scattered storms also up near the New York State border, the New York State PA border. More on the New York side than on the PA side. The ones on the PA side were there, and then they fell apart. And you also have some heavy storms going on back in and around Pittsburgh. So it was, just figure to pull up the local radar shot, and maybe I'll just jump down one to Fort Dix and Mount Holly so you could see the view from this perspective. Nothing much going on in New Jersey. There were a few pop-ups in South Jersey and a few pop-ups in North Jersey that lasted all of about 20 or 30 minutes. And then you've got this area that's kind of pushing its way to the east. In another hour and a half, as we start getting closer to sunset, you're going to see this stuff pretty much fall apart. So let's go back to the weather maps and just take a look at what we expect this weekend. Again, I think it's a typical summer weekend going forward. We are going to start. I'm going to do the upper air first. And the pattern, we talked about this yesterday and the day before and the day before that Canadian jet stream flexing, and you get these troughs and short waves coming down. This is going back to Tuesday. Blocking high over Greenland continues to force the westerlies further south than they otherwise would be. We have been, and by the way, for those of you, you're around in the winter months, we talk about blocking in the NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation. It has been negative through much of the month of July, and that is one of the reasons why you've got this jet stream suppressed as far south as you've had it. One trough pulls out early next week, and here comes the next one. with another front for the middle part of next week. I think, by the way, on Wednesday, I think there's a fair chance that we could see maybe some severe weather in the east. We'll visit that possibility as we go through the weekend and take a look at how things evolve. But you got a fairly deep trough, and you're going to have a decent cold front. When I say decent, I mean in terms of strength, moving into the eastern part of the United States. That's a very cold trough that's being indicated. And look how far south this one gets, too. I mean, you got the southern edge of the upper air westerly winds, the flow of the jet stream going down into southern Louisiana and then across the Florida panhandle and out over the open waters of the Atlantic. That jet is suppressed way to the south, and that trough holds in the east through much of next week, the latter part of next week and into next weekend, before you finally get something to wrap up in Canada and lift it out. And then guess what? Here comes the next one as we head down into the long range. So it's just been this really unending, unchanging, persistent pattern that has hung around through much of July and will probably at least take us into the first half of August. Now, my usual view of things is that patterns go about 6 to 8 weeks before you get some kind of a change. So it would probably argue that maybe later in the month of August, maybe in the second half of the month of August, we might see the sign of the pattern changing a little bit. I'll let the models throw the clues out, and we'll see what happens. But for now, we'll just stick with what we got. Now, going forward for the weekend, for my area, folks in my area, eastern PA to southern New England, much like today, some scattered pop-ups, maybe a slightly better chance tomorrow in areas further to the east, but I still think they'll be mostly north and west of the coast. The cold front will come through here early Sunday morning, maybe a stray shower or storm with that during the early morning hours. And then we get a shot of dry air that takes over for later Sunday night, and Monday before we start to see it give way. Now, I don't know why the GFS keeps trying to bring what looks like some rain up the coast on Monday. I'm a little bit dubious of this. Here's what it looks like on the radar. I'll back it up, the GFS's view of the radars for Saturday. So it really is not producing very much on Saturday. I would just be careful with the fact that these models don't really do well with this short-range stuff anyhow. And then Sunday, not much, if anything at all, a little bit of leftover rains in the southeast. But there seems to be some kind of hanging wave that the GFS sees that some of the other models aren't seeing. And that brings in some rain here, supposedly Monday night into Tuesday, moving up the coast. I think you're going to have to prove this to me. And then afterwards, it's Wednesday that we get this stronger front that comes through. And I think here is where we might see a chance for some severe weather for somebody. We'll revisit that through the weekend and into next week as we get closer. And then, of course, beyond that, that front does get hung up because that upper trough gets hung up. So that may make things problematic for the end of next week, with chances for showers and thunderstorms up and down the coast until you finally get a strong enough push to get it out of the way, which you see it here. It seems strong enough. And then, again, more of the same. Another cold front and another cold front as we go into the long range. It's a fairly straightforward pattern, so you just deal with these things as they move along. And I always say, I've always said that the trend is your friend, so you just kind of wait for the trend to change. You follow the trend until further notice, until there are really obvious signs that something is going to happen a bit differently. Salem Surveying, thank you so much for hitting Super Chat tonight on this Friday night. Cigars for me, and thank you very much. I really do appreciate it, as always. I'm really glad that you are on here on a regular basis, and thank you very much for the kind words. I just look at stuff and I don't know. I just kind of call it the way way it is and forecast the way I think it's going to be, and you get it all hysterics free, which is a good thing. Alfred Phillips, haven't seen you in a while. Our buddy from Wainwright, Alaska, on the North Slope there. Active wildfires, 251 active wildfires in Alaska. Part of the rejuvenation process, I guess, nature's way. burning the dry timber and then all the new seedlings. It's very interesting with some of with some of these wildfires. There are actually certain pine tree cones need the fires to cause the seeds to sprout. It's the heat of the fire that gets that process going, which is very interesting how nature has evolved that way with some trees that they rely on the wildfires, the lightning strikes that create the wildfires in the dry areas in order to get the next generation of trees to germinate. It's a very, very interesting way nature works. Jason Schaefer, nice to see you here on board with Snowy 23, the South Johnny Quest, Bob Hurley, Charlie Baker, Chuck Cardillo. I get a kick out of you, Chuck, when when you send me my morning message and you tell me how cool it is up in the Catskills. July, I think, for me is probably the month I like the least, and August is right behind it. Just want to get rid of this humidity and make it go away and get to those nice dry air masses that you get in the autumn. And hopefully it won't be another one of these seasons where the summer gets extended for an extra 4 or 5 weeks, because I would not. Think back to last year and how humid it was during the month of September into the first part of October. It wasn't even the warmth so much, but the humidity was so thick and so high. Dew points in the 70s in the month of October was something that you really didn't see very often. Johnny with Johnny Questis, with all that wind shear, any chance for severe weather in your area the next day or so? I think you could probably see some isolated severe thunderstorms. I'm not thinking you're going to see any kind of widespread severe outbreak, but in the throes of this deep tropical air that's covering parts of the east, you could always wind up with a few severe cells. I would tend to think that if there's going to be severe weather, it would be probably more in the form of heavy rain and flash flooding as opposed to strong gusty winds or any kind of tornadic risk, as far as what I can see. In fact, I don't even think that SPC has any kind of major severe risk going on for Saturday in the east. And they don't, just general thunderstorms. And also for Sunday, just general thunderstorms. Even for the rest of the country, just a couple of scattered areas of marginal risk. But everywhere east of from the Rockies east, for the most part, at risk for thunderstorms at one point or another over this coming weekend. And let's see. 32.5 degrees, says Alfred Phillips in the North Pole region this evening. It won't be that many months from now, Alfred, that you'll be in 24 hours of darkness with a minus sign in front of that 32.5, and that won't be the wind chill. That would be the temperature. I always love your winter observations. A lot of us get a kick out of it. Jersey Jeff, also I agree with you. I hope when we get to autumn, it is a nice one. By the way, if you think about it, so this is the third, so you got 3, 9, 16, 23. Counting this weekend, 5 weekends left, and that fifth weekend is the Labor Day weekend. So summer's moving right along here. So you snow lovers, it's going to happen, okay? It is going to happen. Robert Hurley, take Route 23 west from Cairo, up the mountain, past Point Lookout, into Wyndham on a fall day, and the temperature. Oh, I'm sure, absolutely. I haven't done Wyndham, but I have been up at some of the mountains up in New Hampshire, and the huge difference in terms of temperatures. Snowy. We do worry when you don't post, so we're glad to see you on board. And the James NASCAR fan is here. You're right, as I say, the trend is your friend. Chris Alley was here, but dinner called, and I can totally relate to that, because dinner is going to be calling me in about a half an hour or so. After I do one more weathercast, I'm going to run out and get something to eat. All right, folks, let's wrap it up here. Thanks again, Salem Surveying, for Super Chat hit tonight. Again, always appreciated here. And let's see, as far as the weekend is concerned, I've been kind of laying off the weekend. So why don't we do this? If it looks like something tropical is going to develop on the Atlantic side, I'll live stream. If it looks like something tropical is not going to fire up, then I may just take the whole weekend off and we'll just have weather in fives tomorrow and Sunday morning. I did not do weather in 5 this morning. I had a few things I had to take care of, so I didn't really have the time to get it done. But I will do it tomorrow and on Sunday, so at least you'll have something. And again, if the tropics look like they're going to get busy, I'll jump on board at some point, either Saturday night or Sunday night. All right. Otherwise, we'll be back here on Monday. Figure at 7:05 Eastern Time. Just watch for the schedules. Patreon posts. Patreon members, you always get that post a couple of hours before. And by the way, the chat here, once the live stream is scheduled, the chat board is usually open. So if you're new, please jump on board, introduce yourself, ask any questions you'd like. The pre-show chat is usually a good place to do it because I'm sitting there watching the screen, maybe not continuously, but I am sitting by the screen. So if you've got some questions or comments, it's a good time to share. I'm Skyhawker, Avatar, Skyhawk Avatar. Okay, got it now. My mistake. Skyhawk Avatar. Have a great weekend, you too, and everybody else. Have a great and fantastic weekend. Enjoy yourself. We'll see you at some point between now and Monday.